Hello and welcome to this third tutorial video on how to make a ragdoll body. This tutorial should help you whether you are using our pattern and instructions alongside one of our kits where the fabrics are supplied, or whether you are using your own recycled fabrics. In our first and second tutorial videos we looked at cutting out the paper pattern pieces. We looked at marking up and cutting out the fabric pattern pieces. In this third tutorial video we're going to start putting those fabric pattern pieces together to make the parts of our ragdoll. A couple of useful tips before we begin. Keep an eye on your seam allowance. The seam allowance is the distance from the edge of your fabric pattern piece to the row of stitches that you do. We suggest 5 mm. If your seam allowance is much narrower or wider than 5 mm, you're going to find it difficult to make your pattern pieces fit together. Even though our fabric doesn't have a wrong side or a right side, I'm going to be using those terms as we go along in case it's useful for your project. Our first instruction tells us to pin together and sew 2 arm pieces. Where the notches are showing at the top of the arm, we can leave that open because that's going to be sewn into a seam, but we'll use them to line it up. We also leave this area open, and that matches up with notches on the other side. That's where we're going to stuff our finished arm. So now with the right sides in and the wrong sides out, we place one piece on top of the other, and we're going to pin and sew all the way around. When you're pinning, choose little areas like this where there's a very definite indication of the shape of your pattern piece, so that you can make sure you're lining them up neatly, that you don't have any gathers. And I'm going to use this area next to the wrist, and we'll carry on all the way around, making sure all of the 2 pattern pieces line up. Once that's done, we're going to go all the way around with back stitch, being very careful around these narrow areas. Make sure your seam allowance is the correct 5 mm. Up to the top, leave this area open and just do a few stitches on this corner to make sure that the pieces stay together. I'm using a matching 100% cotton thread and a betweens needle. This one is single, but I like to use my thread double because it's just a little bit more robust. So when that's all pinned and sewn, it will look like this. We've sewn all the way around the outside, carefully around this narrow point and all the way up to this point, which we've left open to here, and a few stitches at the end just to hold it in position. Once you've completed this process for both arms, turn them right side out. Next we're going to make a leg. We have here a leg back, leg front and foot top. We'll start off by sewing a foot top to a leg front, with the right sides in and wrong sides out. We're going to sew a foot top to a leg front, and we'll sew all around this curve. There are 3 notches here to help you line it up, and when that's done, here's one I made earlier, blue Peter badge please, a leg front sewn around this curve. So fold it flat and that gives us our leg front. Now once again, with right sides in, we take our leg back and place it on top of our leg front. We'll pin this in place. I like to use definite areas like the very edges of these 2 pattern pieces. We know how they line up. If we start off by pinning those together, I'm pinning directly in from the outside to the inside, so that if you are doing this on a machine you can sew straight over the top. There's a notch here next to that join, that seam, so we can make sure that's lined up correctly. And we'll carry on up. Don't get carried away as I often do and sew it all the way up. Check where your marks and notches are. There's one just here that's the start of the opening that we're going to leave for stuffing the leg. So pin to there, and then we're going to sew up this to this point and then all the way up this leg to the very top. As with the arms, we don't sew across this top here. The reason is, once you've sewn it and turned it the right way out, when you put your arms or legs into the body to sew them in, you're actually sewing through an already sewn seam and it's quite difficult. So we continue to pin it into position, so all the way up to the very top, not across that area, and then we sew a few stitches here just to hold that pattern in position. So now we have a leg front with a foot top, all sewn to a leg back. We've sewn around it and we've left our opening here for stuffing. We've got an opening at the bottom that we're going to add the foot bottom to, and we have this nice profile where the toe sticks out. So you'll see that there are notches, 3 at the back on the heel and 1 for the toe. So they match up with these notches that are on the foot bottom, 3 at the back. And we're going to put the heel in position and we're going to pin it in place. And because you're adding a circular piece, it's really important to line it up correctly. This is why you've added these notches, and it is worth taking a little bit of time to space it out nicely. Have a bit of a fiddle about. This is where, if your seam allowance is wrong at the sides here and the tube you've created is a little narrower or wider, you'll have a little bit of trouble making the circle fit. Look for that. There's definitely another notch here somewhere. Let's find it. There it is. So we put a pin through that, get those lined up nicely, and then at the front fit this in, push it into position and pin it, and that should all fit together beautifully as long as you've got your seam allowance. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, there's no point measuring it all the way around, just try and keep it even. There we go. Now that's all pinned in place, we're going to sew it into position around in a circle, and then we repeat that with the other leg and turn them the right way out. If you would like to paint a face on your doll instead of using glass or plastic eyes, it might help to trace the shape onto the face before you sew the head together. Check out our ragdoll making tutorial video, Painting Your Doll's Face. Now it's getting exciting, now we're working on the head. So we have a head front and a neck front with a wider top section. We'll start with the head. We're going to pin this large central dart, which gives us the shape of the forehead. So we pin this in position, and because these seams are going to show, make your back stitch as neat and tight as you can. Then the 3 darts at the bottom, these give you the shape of the jaw and the chin. So when you're sewing these darts, try to taper them into the head slightly, so as you come along, rather than straight in and angular, try to give them a little curve so that they blend into the shape of the head. There we go, those are the 4 darts done, and that will look like this once it's sewn. And I'll open it out a little and show you what it looks like. Your forehead shape, and the darts at the bottom that give you that nice curve of the head. So let's get that right side up, and let's take the neck front, and this wider section at the top attaches to the head using these positioning points. So as I say, the wider part of the neck front attached to the head. Pin it into position and space it out evenly. Let's try and again make sure we don't have any gathers there. That'll be dependent on that seam allowance that I keep banging on about. And once you've pinned that into position, you sew along this join between the neck and the head. These are the head back sides, there's a gap between those 2 words, and the neck back. We're going to sew the darts on the head back sides. Now check as you're doing this, it's a very easy mistake to make that you make these exactly the same, so that when you come to fit them together you have 2 pieces that are exactly the same, and when they're fitted together one of them has the seams on the outside. So it's worth double checking as you go along. Make them a mirror image of each other. Once those are sewn, they will look like this. And with the right sides in, again, we're going to lay one on top of the other and sew them down the middle. It's quite nice because you can use the darts to evenly space them, make sure they're pinned. And then we're going to sew all along this line. Now I have the two pieces of the head back sewn together along this line. I'm going to add the neck back. So they're lined up nicely at the darts. I'm going to lay it on my table with the right side up so that I can take the neck back and put the right sides together, again with the wider part of the neck attaching to the head, and pin it into position, evenly spacing it again with our pins. Don't need many on a small piece like this. And then we're going to sew these two pieces together, and just note again that your neck tapers in just a little bit so the wider part is attached to the head. Now the ears, we have 4 pieces to make our 2 ears. Let's put 2 pieces together, right sides in, wrong sides out, and pin them together. Again, you can see there's a curve at the top of the ear and it tapers down. Right sides in, wrong sides out, and we're going to sew all the way around the curve and leave the flat edge open so that we can, when it's done, turn it the right way out so we have an ear that's like that. I put a pin through these at this point and it helps to keep them flat. It makes them easier to put into the head. Now we have the 2 parts that make up our head. The back of the head, which I'm going to curve up like this, and the front of the head. So with the right sides together, we'll start pinning them using things like the central seams to keep them level. And here we have at the join of the neck and the head, we'll use that seam as well. And let's go right round to the other side and do the same there. Pin those 2 neck and head seams together. And then I'm going to go to the marks that we've made that show the position of the top of our ear. So let's put a pin in there. That's going to be the top, the curved top part of our ear. So with your ear the right way out and with a curve at the top, we're going to slide it in between the 2 pieces of the front and the back of the head. So curve at the top, right side out, and the flat open edge on the outside there. And we're going to pin that into position. There we go. And we'll repeat that on the opposite side with the other ear using that positioning notch. And then we're going to sew all the way around through all layers including the ears, and we're going to sew the front and the back of the neck together as well. So let's put a pin in there. I'm running out of pins on my little mouse, but you're going to want to add several more pins all the way around the head to hold it in position while you sew. Again, another visible seam, so take your time, make those stitches small and neat all the way around. Keep pulling every few stitches, pull your stitches tight, and there'll be an opening at the bottom. That's the head complete. Now we're going to work on the body front and the 2 body back sides. So we start off with a dart on our body front. As you can see, my body here is blue, and that's because I'm doing the recycled version of our doll using different fabrics, and we didn't quite have enough of the cream fabric to make 2 rag dolls from our cushion, so I'm using a contrasting fabric to make the body. Now we're going to do the darts on the body back sides, and it will actually be the body back sides in this case. It'll give her a nice curved shape at the bottom there so she sits nice and stably. Make sure again when you do these you make the mirror images, don't do 2 exactly the same. So we pin that, and then using a nice matching thread sew all those darts. And then when we have our 2 body back sides, we're going to line up the darts with right sides in and wrong sides out. We're going to pin from the bottom up to the mark that shows the end point of our sewing on this back piece. We're just going to sew from here up to here. The rest of it we leave open so we have access to the back of the body for adding the arms later. And we're almost ready to go. We now have all of the pieces of our ragdoll. The 2 legs now turned right side out, the 2 arms right side out, the body back, which is open mostly except for a little bit of stitching, which is just at the back here, just on that one section. And we have the body front, which just has a little bit of sewing at the dart at the bottom there. We have the nose, which we haven't had to do anything with at the moment, and we have the head and all of its component parts, which is still wrong side out. And we're ready to go. See you in the next video. That concludes our tutorial video. I hope it was helpful. If it was, please subscribe to our channel, give us a like and some feedback. There are more videos coming soon.